This course is presented to you free of charge by TTJ Tech Services of www.ttjtech.biz and by Stir It Up of www.stiritup.com. And remember, stir is spelled with a U, not an I, so that's STURITUP.com. TTJ Tech Services and Stir It Up are pleased to offer this course to you to the glory of God and to the benefit of all those who listen. This is Voiceover In and Out. Session number 1. Our very first session for the 2024-25 training season. We are so glad to have all of you here. Welcome. It is absolutely thrilling. It's a joy to be doing this once again. I've been very excited, looking forward to this today. And we're going to get started. We have a few housekeeping announcements to start things off. And for those of you who have been with us before, a lot of that is redundant. We do apologize, but we definitely need to cover that, especially for all the new folks here. And then we'll introduce our team, and we will get started today with Voiceover In and Out, iOS edition for 2024. And I'd like to begin so what we're going to do is we're going to start with the basics. And I want to cover how to unlock your phone and how to navigate the home screen and just basic navigation with VoiceOver. You might say, well, I don't even have my phone set up yet. Aren't you going to talk about setup? Well, here's the good news. If you are comfortable enough with VoiceOver to navigate basic screens, you can do the setup independently, all by yourself without sighted help. A lot of people think when they get a new phone or something, they have to go to an Apple store or wait for somebody with sight to help them. And that's simply not true. If you get a new iPhone, you turn it on and you can use your triple click accessibility shortcut and turn on VoiceOver right away and do the setup. But here's the thing, you kind of would have to have a little bit of VoiceOver knowledge to get started with that. So if you are completely new to VoiceOver, then maybe, yes, you do want that sighted help to get you into the home screen, get you past the setup and, just for the first time till you learn how to use it. And so that's kind of the place where we're going to start. Now, I am using an iPhone 15 Pro, and that is a device without a home button. Most of the iPhones that you will see now do not have home buttons. They have Face ID and no Touch ID. If you have an iPhone SE, you still have a home button. We will try to remember to cover that as well. But just so you know, we're going to be primarily focusing on the newer devices that have no home button. All right. So we'll try to remember to include everybody here because that's what we want to do. And I've got my iPhone here, so I'll be able to demonstrate things. The first thing I want to demonstrate is unlocking your phone, right? That's where we start. And I use Face ID. Now, if you've never set up Face ID yet, again, that's something we encourage you to do, but we'll talk about that in a later session. We'll talk about that in a session on security and staying safe in a digital world, but we highly encourage you to use Touch ID or Face ID, whichever your phone supports. We encourage you to use a passcode and all those fears that people have. I can't do it without being able to see. I don't have real eyes. Can I still use it? All those things are myths. Face ID works brilliantly. I have 2 artificial eyes. And yeah, there's no problem with using Face ID. So again, we will get into that in a later session. Right now, we're going to assume that your phone is at least set up enough that it can be unlocked and bring you to what we call the home screen, which is kind of the jumping off place. So let me go ahead. Let's see. All right. Can I get to a place where I can this thing is still trying to make me watch YouTube while I'm teaching, and I don't want to do that. Uh, so we're going to get out of it that way and see if this works. Really doesn't matter. It's just a bit of a distraction, but I'll just ignore it if I have to. Try this one more time though. All right, let's see. Okay, try it again. All right, nope, that's going to keep happening. All right, so I'm just going to ignore it. And I've got my phone right here. And that's what we're going to be working on today. How do we unlock our phone? Well, let's get an orientation of the phone. If you have a home button, that home button is going to be at the bottom of the screen. It's the little round button. Most of you will not have a home button. Instead, you'll have Face ID. We'll use that in a moment. Now, you'll hold your phone. I'm turning my volume up so that you can hear it when it's time. You're going to hold your phone such that the screen is on top, obviously. On the back, you'll have your cameras, all of that. On the left-hand side of the phone, you have your volume up and your volume down buttons. And just above the volume buttons is your action button. If you have a new enough device to have an action button, you can press and hold that for whatever the custom action is. By default, it's ring and silent. If you have an older phone, that's not a button, it's a switch, and that's your ring silent switch. The opposite side, on the right side of your phone, is what we call the side button. That will sleep your phone. It will wake your phone. You can hold that to access SIRI. I won't say her name because we'll set off a bunch of devices. You can double click that for Apple Pay. And if it is set up properly, you can triple click that for Voiceover. Now, I will tell you that if you use the method I described and you triple click that button during setup so that you can set up your phone yourself, it automatically assigns Voiceover to that button. If you didn't, if you had sighted help, you have to go into settings and set that to Voiceover, and we'll show you how to do that later. But once it's set, you can just triple click that button for Voiceover. Makes it very easy to share your phone and so on with other people. How do we unlock our phones? Let's start there. Well, we can press that button, or in many cases, depending on the settings, you can just raise your phone or tap on the screen. I'm going to do that, but I'm going to hold my phone just a little bit away from my face so that it will authenticate immediately with Face ID. I will then be on what is known as the lock screen, but my phone will be unlocked because it will have already used Face ID. You may hear it read the time or something, and hopefully you'll hear a little sound that indicates that Face ID worked. Here we go.
2:53.
Okay, there it is. And I'm on the lock screen.
Weather, 64 degrees, cloudy, calendar, next event, Amber, cooking complication simple, show notifications.
All right, I assume that you can all hear that. I was going to make a change to use what they call original sound so you could hear it even better. But my YouTube app is really getting in the way right now, and so I'm not going to try to take the time to mess with that. I think you can hear all of that well enough. I'll hold the phone as close as I can, and we should be able to fix that for Wednesday. So this is what's happening now.
We can hear it.
Okay, good. Thank you, Sarah. Good. So we're on the lock screen, but the phone is unlocked, if that makes any sense to you. And you heard the weather, and that's because I have what's known as a widget that displays the weather on the lock screen. What's a widget? Well, we'll come back to that. All right, we don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but you can hear the weather. You can hear my calendar. And I have an app on there that is a cooking app that I have a widget for as well. And then you heard it say show notifications. So we're going to get to notifications later. I'm not going to mess with that right now. Instead, what I'm going to do is just go to the home screen. Now, we have to learn a gesture to go to the home screen. Right away, we have to learn something, because if you have a home button, you can press that home button, and that's how you go to the home screen. If you don't, you have to use a gesture. The way you do this is you're going to place one finger at the very bottom edge of the screen, I will use my thumb. So I'll be holding my phone in my left hand and I'll reach my left thumb around to the screen and I'll use that. You could also hold the phone in your left hand and you could use your right index finger on the bottom of the screen. And of course, there are other ways that people might think of. When I place my finger on the bottom of the screen, I'm going to hear what I like to call a little blip sound. It's just a short little sound, really kind of, I think, sounds like a blip. And as soon as I hear that sound, I don't lift my finger. I keep it held down and I slide up until I hear the second little blip sound. And that second blip sound is going to be accompanied by a little, almost like a tap. They call it a haptic prompt. It's haptic feedback. That means it's sort of like a tap from my phone. And so when I hear that second blip sound and I feel that little haptic prompt, I can lift my finger and now I'm on the home screen. Let me show you what this sounds like. So I'll get my phone again and I'll bring it back to the lock screen, but where it's unlocked. Okay. Now, if I touch the bottom of the screen, okay, you actually heard two sounds there because I sort of slid my finger a little, but you hear that first little boop, just that little sound. Okay.
56.
And now I got a notification. So we could look at that.
XFINITY, 1 minute ago, driveway, your camera detected motion.
Okay, so that's a camera notification. It doesn't matter. But what I'm going to do now is put my finger there again. And this time, as soon as I hear the blip sound, I'm going to keep sliding up until I hear the second sound. Now,
257.
Phone locked back up. Okay, here we go.
Music, Elvis track.
And I am now home. I am now on the home screen. Let's do the gesture again. Even though I'm on the home screen, I can do it right now. Okay, that's what it sounds like. And that is how we go home. So again, you place the finger on the bottom, slide up, and you're home. Okay, that is the go home gesture. There are other gestures that are similar to that, but we're not going to cover them right now. Now, again, I have my side button set. If I press it 3 times,
Voiceover off.
It turns voiceover off.
Voiceover on.
Turns
Music.
it back on. Okay, that's 3 presses of that side button. So I am now on the home screen. We're going to learn about the home screen in a little bit. But before we can even really learn about the home screen, we need to learn how to move around with VoiceOver. And the way we move around with VoiceOver is with gestures, obviously. This is a touch screen, right? So when I first heard about VoiceOver coming to the iPhone clear back in 2009, I thought to myself, how is this going to work? Because touchscreen, you touch the app and it opens, right? I mean, we know what touchscreens do. I thought, how's a blind person going to ever use a touchscreen? I just imagined myself aimlessly wandering around on the home screen, constantly opening the wrong app and all of these things. And of course, that's not at all what the experience is like. Apple has done such a great job with this. Praise God. It's fantastic. So they've changed the gestures for VoiceOver users. They're different from the non-VoiceOver users. Quite honestly, I tend to call them the sighted gestures versus the non-sighted gestures. I hope that doesn't offend anybody. I apologize. I know it's not very politically correct, but I think it pretty much explains it. If you're sighted, you're probably not using VoiceOver unless you're teaching somebody who isn't sighted, right? So I just call them that, okay? So please just, but so the non-VoiceOver, the sighted gestures are different from the VoiceOver gestures because what we have to do is we have to have a way of knowing where we are on the screen before we activate something. So what Apple has created is what they call the VoiceOver cursor. Now, the VoiceOver cursor, if you can see, looks like a rectangle. And that rectangle moves anytime you move your finger on the screen. And it highlights whatever item currently has the focus. And so what we do to move the VoiceOver cursor around on the screen is we move our finger. We're going to be talking about one finger gestures right now. And you move by simply swiping one finger left to right or right to left. You say, well, what about up and down? Well, be patient. That's what. We're not there yet. But we're talking right now, left and right and left. Now, what's a swipe? Some people will ask that question. A swipe is a very, very quick motion with your finger. You don't rest it first. You put it down and move it at the same time. Because if you rest it first, it's going to move the focus to whatever you rested your finger on, right? We don't want to do that when we're swiping. Now, some people call it a flick. Well, flick seems to be a term that Apple isn't using anymore. They were using it, but mostly you see swipe. I don't know if their keyboard help still says flick, but most of the time they use swipe. But here's the good news, that the terms are interchangeable. There's no difference. You can say flick, you can say swipe. It's the same thing. I just use swipe because that's what I've seen more often than not. So all of the movement is left to right for now. And so you're going to swipe right, which means you take one finger and you swipe it on the screen from the left to the right. That's a one finger swipe right. So when we say swipe right, that moves to the next item on the screen, the next icon on the home screen, the next character on the keyboard, the next element on the screen, whatever it is, wherever you are. Predictable patterns, fundamental gestures. That's fundamental number one. Swipe left and right. Swipe to the right to go forward to the next item. Swipe to the left to go back to the previous item. And I'd like to demonstrate it for you now. Of course, my phone locked again because I waited that long, and that's fine. We've unlocked it now. You hear music first. That's because I have a music widget on my home screen. Again, we'll explain what a widget is later, but I've got that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to one finger touch somewhere. I'm just going to tap one finger anywhere on the screen, and it will bring the focus to the item I tap on.
Weather. Double tap to open.
I happen to tap on weather. And you heard a little voiceover hint there that says double tap to open. So we already know how we're going to open apps now, don't we? We're going to double tap, but I'll come back to that. I want to swipe. So I'm on weather. Now remember, be careful not to rest your finger before you swipe. If you do, you'll now be moving the cursor to whatever you rest on. Let me demonstrate that. This is the incorrect way to swipe. You say to somebody swipe and they don't know and they lay their finger down. Okay, all over the place. Not what we want. So I'm going to go back to weather. And this time I'm going to do it properly. I'm going to swipe to the right.
Notes, contacts, news, books, App Store, TV, podcasts, health.
Okay. All I'm doing is repeatedly swiping right. Each time I swipe, it moves to another icon on the home screen. Books, news, health, all those different apps. I don't know how well you were able to hear over Zoom the fact that every time I've gone to the end of one column, to the end of one row, it makes a little the little sound when it goes to the next row. The home screen, which we'll talk about more in a few minutes, is laid out like a grid. You've got columns and rows. If you don't have a lot of visual memory or spatial awareness, don't worry. I'll explain that in a little bit. But just know that there's 4 icons in a row. And so when you get to the end of that row, it automatically goes to the next row. Okay. And then when we want to go backwards, we swipe to the left. So I'll do that now. We should hear some of the same icons now.
Podcasts, TV, App Store, books.
Here's another row.
News, contacts, notes, weather.
And
double tap to open.
We can go even further to the left. Keep going.
Maps, reminders, clock, mail, 128 unread emails.
Oh boy, listen to that.
Double tap to open.
There's a little what we call a badge on certain apps that indicates something needs your attention. And there's a badge count of 128 on the mail app, and it tells me 128 unread messages. So we'll, look at those later. Now, if we want to open any of these, we already heard the voiceover.
Stay tuned for the mail sorting workshop for Matt Vallbridge to be attending. I'm just joking.
There's a story behind that, of course, too, folks. But if we want to open any of these, we know exactly what the gesture is already because VoiceOver told us. And that's because we have our hints turned on. So if you're, semi-new to this and you're thinking, I really want to turn those hints off because I don't like to hear them, I would encourage you not to turn them off. You never know if you're going to miss out on something that's going to make your life easier. If you don't want to hear them, just don't wait for them. Just interrupt them. You notice I didn't have to wait for it to say double tap to open. Or if it started to, I can...
Double contacts.
See, I can keep moving. And so we know now, though, that we can double tap. So here's what happens. Once you have the VoiceOver cursor focused on a particular item, and we're going to do settings. So I'll tap on that. I kind of know approximately where that is on my screen.
Home, wallet, settings.
Okay.
Double tap to open.
I'm going to double tap now. So what that means is 2 taps very quickly with one finger. Tap, tap. Okay. Now, a million different things are going through people's heads. I'll try to address all of them, just everything decent and in order, right? We want to get through a process here. But for now, one finger, two taps. One finger, tap, tap. That's a double tap. Now, let me cover some of these things that are in people's minds. First of all, it is not necessary to double tap in exactly the same spot as you previously tapped. If you bring focus to something, you can double tap anywhere on the screen in order to open it or activate it, okay? As long as you don't do something that VoiceOver would consider a single tap first. So here's an example of what not to do. We find
Wallet settings. Double tap to open.
And I say, oh, yes, I'm going to double tap. And then I just lay my finger down and I just wait and do this.
Web notes.
Well, now I'm not going to be able to open settings, right? Because I landed on mail, notes, and weather very quickly there. That's an example of what not to do. If you're going to double tap, it's very quick, tap, tap, okay? And so when you do it properly, there's no need to make sure your finger's in the exact same position as it was before. It's two tap anywhere on the screen, okay? Now, the second thing that's in some people's minds is, what if I have maybe dexterity issues? I just can't do that double tap with one finger. Well, you have a couple of options. The first option is you can double tap by tapping once with one finger and then once with another finger. So I could tap once with my left thumb and then once with my right index finger and so on, as long as I do it quickly enough. There's even something called a split tap. I really would prefer not to get into that right at this second, because I feel like it's more of an advanced gesture in the sense that it's a little more like doing a little dance there. And I prefer just to wait a little bit on the split tap. But for those of you who know what it is, if you want to use the split tap, you can. I don't think it's easier. But there's a third option if you're really struggling with the double tap, and that is you can actually change the speed at which you must double tap. That's done in your settings, your VoiceOver settings. They call it double tap timeout. So if that is a problem, you go through this course 3 or 4 days and you say, boy, I really just can't get that double tap on my fingers. I just can't tap quickly enough. We're going to show you the settings, and then you'll be able to change the double tap timeout a little bit so that you don't have to double tap quite as quickly. That said, I'm going to go ahead and double tap on settings. Make sure I'm still there.
FaceTime wallet settings. Double tap to open.
Now here I go. Tap, tap. Ready?
Settings.
And now I'm in the settings app. And now we'll practice the go home gesture. We know we're in settings because if I tap on the screen anywhere.
Bluetooth, cellular, personal hotspot. Button.
So I've got all these settings. Now I just do my go home gesture. Remember, one finger at the bottom. I hear a little blip. I swipe up to the second blip.
Battery. Settings.
And I'm back.
And I'm App Store, books, news.
I'm on my home screen again. Yep. So let's do that one more time. Go into settings.
Wallet settings. Settings.
And swipe up from the bottom. Back home.
Music.
Okay. So that is how we navigate the screen at the most basic level. And this works anywhere and everywhere. What have we covered so far? If you're taking notes, we've explored by touch. What does it mean to explore by touch? Just tap somewhere on the screen. Very simple. Anywhere you tap, you bring focus to it. VoiceOver reads it, and it now becomes the focused item. You say, well, I tap, and I hear nothing but a little beep sound. I don't even know if I can demonstrate that on the home screen.
Mail, TV.
No, I don't think I can.
Double tap.
There I did. You hear that little boop, just that little sound. You see, I tap somewhere and I hear nothing but that little sound. That means you didn't land on anything. There was nothing where your finger landed. So either try again or just swipe left or right with one finger and it'll put you on the nearest item. So that brings me to the second thing that we learned, which is to swipe to the right to go to the next item, swipe to the left to go to the previous item. And that is how we move on the screen. And then we learned the double tap. One finger, double tap.
Screen tap.
Or I gave you some alternate ways, but basically one finger, double tap. And that opens, well, let me just put it this way. That activates whatever has the focus. So on the home screen, that means that it opens the selected app. If you happen to be on the keyboard, that means like the on-screen keyboard, if you double tap on a letter on the keyboard, it inserts that letter. It types that letter. If you happen to be on a button, you double tap and it activates that button. It is the activate gesture. And on the home screen, that means that it double tap will open that particular app that you are focused on. And again, we also learned the go home gesture, which is the swipe up from the bottom. You got to place a finger at the bottom edge. You'll hear a little blip sound. That's very important. Our sighted counterparts that are not using VoiceOver, they don't have to do that. They just swipe up from the bottom. But we need to make sure that we're swiping in the correct place. They can see a little bar there at the bottom. So how do we know we're in the correct place? Well, that's why that little blip sound is there. If you place your finger on the bottom of the screen and you don't hear that blip sound, you might as well not even try the slide. Just lift your finger up and have another go at it, because it means you're in the wrong place. So you're at the very bottom edge of the screen, you place your finger, you hear the correct sound, you slide up to the second sound. And again, that second sound will be accompanied by a little haptic prompt that indicates that you now are where you need to be. You just lift your finger up and you've gone home. Now, there are some other gestures we're going to learn as we progress here today, but I want to talk now about what the home screen kind of looks like and how it is set up, because we are to that point where we want to talk about the home screen a little bit. And by the way, just so you know, these classes typically will go between 90 minutes and 2 hours. Oftentimes, especially in these early classes, it's going to be closer to 2 hours, especially till we do Q&A. But anyhow, so the home screen. The home screen is divided up into several components. There are several parts to the home screen. Now, the first part is the app area. That's the app icons that we were just working with. That is where you look at each of the apps, books, news, TV, all those different things that you heard. And those are your app icons. The other thing that tends to be with your app icons, if you have any set up, are widgets. And I told you we'd come back to widgets. You can have widgets along with your apps in the app icon area of the home screen. You can also have widgets in your lock screen. Your widgets will give you real-time access to information without you having to open an app. So, for example, if I look at my lock screen, I showed you
3:13 p.m. Weather 64 degrees, partly cloudy, high of 64 degrees, low of 49 degrees.
Okay, that's the weather right now. That's the current temperature and the weather conditions, what the high and the low are. If there were any, rain or snow, it would show me that. But this is a quick way. I didn't have to open the weather app to see that. Another widget that I have here.
Calendar. Next event, 5:30 p.m.
So that tells me I have another event at 5:30 p.m. and I didn't have to even open my calendar to know that. So the widgets, there's all kinds of widgets that you can have, and you can have different sizes, and then the size affects how much information you have. So this is something we'll get into later if you want to learn how to add widgets and so forth. But I really, really like widgets. And what they do, again, is they just give you real-time access to information very quickly without you even having to open up an app. On my home screen, I have what's known as the Smart Stack. And that is a widget that has multiple widgets in one, but it's smart because it automatically picks the widget that is most relevant at any given moment and displays it. So, for example, if it's going to rain in the next, half hour or something, it might display the weather widget and show me that rain is coming. Or if I have an event coming up in a half hour, it might show me the calendar widget or maybe the maps widget so I can get directions to that location. If my battery is low on any of my connected devices, the phone, my Apple Watch, my AirPods, it'll show me the battery widget, So it's a smart stack because it automatically displays what's relevant. Right now,
3:15 p.m.
my smart stack
Music
has the music widget, so that's fine. Oh, and it also has the maps widget. Oh, let's see. Oh, photos widget that's showing me some photos right now I can look at, and that means that there's nothing critical, no upcoming events right away, no precipitation, any of that stuff. So it's just showing me some things that I might enjoy. Quick access to play music, a photo or two, and then I can open that. I can double tap any of those to open their respective apps. Again, this is in the same part of the home screen that you have your app icons that we heard earlier. And as I started to say before, the apps are set up in a grid. What that means is you have a certain number of columns and a certain number of rows. So each row contains 4 apps. And I don't know. Let's see. Each row has this 4 columns. This is books. And if I can actually I'm not going to tell you what that gesture is yet, but I want to see if it works. Yeah, it tells me what row and column. So I'll show you that later. But you have 4 apps across each of these rows. And then we get into other areas of the home screen. I'd like to go to the next area of the home screen. And that next area is going to be the very thing that shows up right after the last app in the main part of the screen.
Home.
There's my
wallet settings.
Settings.
Double tap to open.
And if I swipe to the right one more time, listen to what I have.
Search. Page 1 of 8. Adjustable. Activate to open Spotlight. Swipe up or down with one finger to adjust the value.
See how good these hints are? So it said search and it said page 1 of 8. Now what these are, this is a page selector. This is the next part of our home screen. And the reason for this page selector is because once you get a certain number of apps on your home screen, it has to create more home screens for you, more pages, in other words. And I happen to have 8 pages because I don't use a lot of folders. I tend to just like my apps to be set up where I want them. And so I have 8 home screen pages, and it told me that I can swipe up or down with one finger to go to the next or previous page. So I'm on page 1.
Search. Page 1 of 8.
If I swipe up with one finger.
Page 2 of 8. Page 3 of 8. Page 4 of 8.
And I can swipe around now, and you'll see that there's different apps on this page.
Assistant, Google Home, Sam's Club, Amazon, Best Buy, Wendy's, ChatGPT.
Okay, all these different apps that I have. And I didn't show you all of them, of course, but just a few there so you could see that they were different from what we had previously. And then if I want to go back to page 1, I find the selector.
Sheets, search, page 4 of 8.
And this time I'll swipe down with one finger.
Page 3, page 1 of 8.
And now we're back on page 1. There are other ways to move between pages also, but I wanted to show you that specific to the page selector. You also heard it say that you could activate to, I think it said to view Spotlight or activate to search. Let me see what it says here exactly. The first part of the hint, it says activate to open Spotlight. So you heard it say search. This is a button also. You could double tap this button. And when you double tap it, instead of changing the page, what it's going to do is it's going to open an edit field for Spotlight. Now, I'm not going to really get into Spotlight today. We will a little bit on Wednesday, maybe today if there's time, but I doubt it, probably Wednesday. And basically, that is a search tool. They'll let you search your phone and the internet and a whole bunch of things. A lot of people would just use SIRI. But nevertheless, Spotlight is another tool at our disposal, and you open it by double tapping on that page selector. So we have covered 2 components of the home screen so far. We've covered the icon area, which is your apps and your widgets. We've covered the page selector / search button. Now, what if we swipe one more time to the right of that search button?
Books, apps, search.
There it is. Let's swipe to the right again now.
Dock, phone, Safari, messages, music. Double tap to open.
And you'll notice now,
Music.
I swipe right and I hear that little bonk sound and it won't move any further because that is it. That's as far to the right as we can go. So what you have just to the right of your page selector, and really where it is it's the very bottom of the screen. It's a row of icons called the dock. Voiceover said dock. I don't know if you heard that, but it did say that. The dock is persistent across all of your home screen pages, no matter how many pages you may have, meaning that the 4 app icons on the dock will be the same no matter what page you're on. In my case, I think it's still the default as Apple put them, which that's fine for me. So it's phone on the left, followed by Safari to the right, and then messages, and then music. If I go to page 3, my dock will still have phone, Safari, messages, music. If I go to page 8, my dock is still going to have phone, Safari, messages, and music. The dock never changes unless you manually move the icons around, which we're not learning today, later. So that's your dock. It's persistent. The icons always stay the same. And that is why it's a great place to put your favorite and most important, most used apps, because they're always going to be there on every single page. Okay, now we've covered the app area, icons and widgets. We've covered the search and page selector button. And now we've covered the dock. The next part we're going to cover is what's at the very top of the screen. You can't get to this by swiping, folks. You got to bring your finger up. I suggest for now using the left of the screen till you get really used to it. So we bring our finger up to the upper left corner of the screen. We get the status bar.
3:21 p.m. Status bar item. Swipe.
And I'm not going to let it read that whole hint right now, but the first icon on my status bar is the time. As I swipe to the right,
Dynamic Island, empty. Cellular, 3 of 4 bars. Signal, home-FEA's 96% battery power. Not charging.
And that's it. Now, let me be clear. What you have on your status bar will vary depending on what's going on. Sometimes you'll have additional things. Some things will replace other things. It just depends on what the status bar needs to show at a given time. It basically always shows the time and the battery indicator, the time on the left, the battery status on the right. But everything in between is kind of subject to change just depending on what else you have going on. Right now, I have my cellular bars and I have the Wi-Fi network that I'm connected to also, praise God. You also heard it say Dynamic Island. Now, this is a thing that was introduced first on the iPhone 14 Pro, and now it's on all the iPhone models. The Dynamic Island is normally empty during normal use until it needs to display something for you. And what it displays is information that is helpful, that is relevant to a specific app or function. For example, if I am playing music, the name of that song will show up in the Dynamic Island. I can quickly double tap on that to open the music app. If I have a timer going, why I can see that in the Dynamic Island so that I don't have to stay in the clock app. Anytime I want to look, set a timer for 1 minute. So
1 minute starting.
Now my timer's set, and basically what I have, if I touch let me unlock my phone. I'm not in the timer. I'm not in the clock app. I'm on the home screen.
Notes, contacts.
But if I touch the top,
Double tap to open. Timer 0:43. 3:23 p.m. Home dash timer 0.
See, so even if I'm in other apps, I can see the timer. Some of your food delivery apps will display the progress up there. Some of the sports apps will display sports scores up there. So this is the Dynamic Island. You don't have to worry about it. People say, how do I add stuff to it? How do I get rid of it? You don't. It's just there when it is needed. Otherwise, you can just ignore it. It will display low battery alerts in the Dynamic Island, and VoiceOver will interrupt whatever else it's reading to tell you that there's a low battery so that you don't miss that. But that will go away after a couple of seconds. It's just there in the Dynamic Island for a few seconds. When it needs to be, then it goes away. And the other stuff stays there until now, like my timer went off. So I'll say, do I have to say dismiss to my timer?
Dismiss 3:20.
And now you'll notice that my Dynamic
Island empty.
is empty once again, okay? Because the timer's done. So that's how easy it is to use the Dynamic Island, and that's the status bar. Again, your time is always going to be on the left and your battery status on the right. Everything in between is kind of subject to change, just depending on what you're doing. Most often, you probably expect to see your cellular bars and either a Wi-Fi icon if you're connected to Wi-Fi, or some sort of a data icon if you're not, 5G plus, LTE, whatever it might be. And then your Um, sometimes you'll have other stuff. If you're maybe in something like maps or something, it may say location tracking on. You might see microphone in use up there. There's different things that will show up. But again, these are they're there when they need to be to alert you of things. That's your status bar. Now, if I had let VoiceOver speak its hint after reading any of those status bar items, it would have told you swipe down with 3 fingers to open. Well, let me just let VoiceOver say it because I know I'm not saying it exactly right.
3:25 p.m. Status bar item. Swipe down with 3 fingers to reveal notifications. Swipe up with 3 fingers to reveal the control center. Double tap to scroll to top.
Okay, so there's 3 things there. You can, once you are on the status bar, you have to be on the status bar for this to work, not anywhere else. But when you have focus on the status bar, you can swipe down with 3 fingers for notifications. You can swipe up for 3 fingers with 3 fingers for control center. I'll come back to the last one in a minute, but let's just talk about those 2. Swipe down with 3 fingers for notifications. Swipe up with 3 fingers for control center. This gesture works on all devices, but it's primarily used for our home button users, iPhone SE. The newer devices have an alternate way of doing this, and this is the way that they kind of tell us to teach it now, although, again, it will work even on those devices. My 15 Pro, I can still do that. I can swipe down with 3 fingers, but there's another way they've given us that I like better. You don't have to have focus on the status bar first. Instead, all you have to do is the exact opposite of the go home gesture, meaning instead of going from the bottom, you start at the top. And if we swipe to the second blip, we'll get the control center. If we swipe to the third blip, we've never done that yet, but if we do, we'll get our notification center. So allow me to open the control center because that's the next thing that we're going to show you. So again, if you want to use notification center, you have 2 choices as to how to get there. Option 1 is you tap on the status bar to bring focus to it.
3:27 p.m. Status bar.
And now you're going to swipe up with 3 fingers on the screen to open it. That's one way. The other way is to not even worry about the status bar. Just touch the upper, let's say, right corner. You could do left, I think, also, but let's say right. You hear that little sound? And you swipe down to the second sound.
Control center, airplane mode, switch button.
And I am now in the control center.
Double tap and
Now, I happen to land on the airplane mode button, but I want to show you that there's actually some stuff to the left of that airplane mode button. If you're on a Zoom call, you have some video controls and different things, but I don't on my phone right now. But what I do have, first I got to go past my status bar.
95% alarm set, VPN, home dash Xfinity mobile, cellular, 3 if dynamic island, power, button.
There's a power button. And again,
add controls, button.
There's an add controls button. So there's 2 buttons there at the very, very far left top of the screen, power and add controls. The power button is there when we're in the control center to allow us to quickly power off our device. And the add controls button will allow us to change or add items to the control center. I feel like that's not a day one thing, so I'm not going to go into it today. We will eventually talk about it, but not today. I want to go back now to the right because I did want to show you that they were there, especially for our more advanced users, our veterans who have been here with us a number of years. A little treat for you there because you can explore that. But let's go back now to the right just to show you our controls here in the airplane mode is first.
Airplane mode, switch button, off. Double tap and hold to show more controls. Double tap to toggle setting.
And you heard now that airplane mode is off, which is good because, of course, if we put airplane mode on, it disables our Wi-Fi, our cellular, and everything. But you heard double tap to toggle setting. So again, it's just a button, right? You just double tap it to change the state of it. But you also heard something else. Double tap and hold for additional controls. This is another gesture that we're going to learn. It's called the long press gesture. Long press means, for sighted users, simply what it says. Long press, that is just tap and hold. But for VoiceOver users, we know we have to double tap first. So it's a double tap and hold. Long press is double tap and hold. Everybody commit that to memory or write it down. Long press means double tap and hold. And it's going to be a very important gesture throughout your use of VoiceOver and your use of the iPhone or really any other Apple device, because the long press option is how we get context menus, contextual options that are related to what we have there. Now, sometimes we can use the rotor. And if I would have let VoiceOver speak even longer, you would have heard it say actions. You would have heard it say actions available. Indeed, in this case, we can do that, but I haven't gotten into the rotor yet. You don't know what that is yet unless you've been with us before. So that doesn't mean much to you if you've never heard of it before. We will cover the rotor. We're going to spend plenty of time on the rotor on Wednesday. But if you are familiar with it already, yes, many times the rotor does have a lot of the same options, not always the exact same ones. But the long press menu is really where it's at. That's where your context options are. And if I go back home, if I go out of the control center completely, there's a go home gesture. I can long press something here. Like, let's say I want to long press on the TV icon.
Double tap to open.
Remember, you double tap and hold. If that doesn't work for you dexterity wise, you can also just triple tap on it. That'll do the same thing with VoiceOver.
Remove app.
I just tested it. There it is. And you have a context menu. Remove app.
Require Face ID. Button. Edit home screen. App icon. Button. Small widget. Medium-sized widget. Large widget. Dismiss context menu.
And that was our TV app where you had different options that you could use. And some of them have more context-specific options. Like I think Maps has...
App icon, small meet lock, mark my location, send my location, search nearby, edit home screen, remove app, dismiss context menu.
We'll dismiss that. But yes, that one had specific things to map. So you see how the long press works. Okay. Again, that's a double tap and hold, or just a triple tap if that's easier for you. And again, that is a context. It works in a lot of places. If you think you should be seeing an option that you're not seeing, try the long press, because there's a good possibility it's in that menu. There's also a possibility that it is in the rotor, which we're going to learn all about on Wednesday. But for now, I used the control center specifically to show you what the long press gesture is about. But I go back to the control center for a moment. The control center displays a lot of your common iPhone controls. I'll just go through some very quickly.
Control center, airplane mode, airdrop, Wi-Fi, more controls, selected, AirPlay audio.
So I've got my, my Wi-Fi and cellular. Now I'm on my playback media controls.
iPhone, not playing, previous track, play, button, next track, screen mirroring, brightness, 17%, adjustable.
And that's a slider. Might as well learn how to use a slider. You just swipe up or down with one finger. And so I can increase my brightness by swiping up.
37, 47, 57%.
And I can swipe back down.
37%.
Okay, that's how you use a slider. 30%. Now, if we wanted to swipe right.
Volume 100%, adjustable.
That's another slider.
Flashlight, switch button, off.
That's just a double tap.
Double tap to toggle setting, actions available.
And then again.
Recognize music, quick note, focus, screen recording, scan code, remote, button, ping my watch.
Lots and lots of options here. And then I also have multiple pages. So we need to learn how to change pages next. That's our next VoiceOver gesture. Before we do that, let me just interject something here that I think is important to reiterate, and hopefully you know this, but I'm going to try to really quickly say this. The purpose of this class is to learn VoiceOver. There is no way that we can teach you every app and every iOS feature while simultaneously trying to teach VoiceOver. And even if we weren't teaching VoiceOver, learning every feature, that's a crazy thought, right? Because number one, we don't know it all. We're works in progress. We're learning every day. Number two, there's so many features, right? Okay, so many features. But we come closer to doing that in our iPad class. If you want a class on, iPad OS, how to do these advanced things, how to create, rich, beautiful word processing documents, and how to print, and how to, create those email boxes that Cliff and I were joking about, and all these kinds of things. That iPad class is the course for you. In this iPhone course, what we're doing is kind of using the apps as a means to teach voiceover. Now, does that mean we're not going to learn anything about the apps? Well, of course not. Of course not. That would be ridiculous. We want to be able to use the apps as well. And we're going to learn some of them and some of the features. It's just that our primary focus is learning voiceover. So I'm not going to teach you every feature. If you want a class where we say, okay, in the control center, this is what this control does, this is what this control does, this is what this control does. We offer those at different times, or you do paid training. This, I'm giving you an overview, but I'm showing you how to navigate. I'm showing you how to work with it so that you can play with it on your own. So in that light, I do need to teach you now the page gesture. There's a way to turn the page or to scroll through different pages. And I will tell you, the control center has like 3 or 4 pages in it by default. I will also tell you that they are customizable. And I will also say, probably even before you start playing with that, you might as well wait for iOS 18.1 because it's coming out soon. There'll be some improvements that you'll like, and I can't talk about them yet because I'd violate the NDR, but just know that that's a good thing. So, if you're really excited about playing with the control center, go ahead and do it. But if you say, I don't know, not in a rush for this, just wait for 18.1. It'll be out later this month, they say. So I'm not going to use the control center to demonstrate page turning. I'm going to use the home screen because we can do that just as well as we did it before. Remember, the home screen has 8 pages on my iPhone. So there are 2 gestures you need to learn, and they're 3-finger scroll gestures. The difference is the direction. One option you have is scroll up and down, swipe up and down with 3 fingers. The other option you have is swipe left and right with 3 fingers. How do I know which one to use? Well, most of the time, every once in a while you'll run into an exception, but the generally accepted wisdom is that if you're trying to scroll page by page through something very long, let's say a long word processing document or a long web page, that is the 3-finger swipe up and down. If you're trying to actually turn the page or change pages, that is typically the 3-finger swipe left and right. And that's what we want to do on our home screen because they're separate pages. So I'm on page 1 right now, I think.
Photos, 2000. Wow. Search, page 1 of 8, adjustable.
And if I swipe back to the left so the focus is on the apps.
Settings, wallet, home.
Okay.
Double tap to open.
Now, what I want to do is I want to go, let's say I want to go to page 3. So I swipe 3 fingers from right to left on my home screen, on my iPhone screen.
Page 2 of 8.
And again,
page 3 of 8. Wikipedia.
And if I want to go back to page 1, I swipe to the right with 3 fingers.
Page 2 of 8. Home. Page 1 of 8.
And there you go. You'll notice it announces the page. So that's another way, instead of using that page selector, as long as you have the focus on the app icons, you can do that. So again, to review, 3-finger scrolling, very important because sometimes you use it to change pages. If you're going to turn the page, go to a different page, 3-finger swipe to the right to go to the previous, and 3-finger swipe to the left to go to the next page. But if you're trying to scroll on a long page, you swipe up with 3 fingers to keep scrolling down, and swipe down with 3 fingers to keep scrolling up near the top of the page. Now, what if I'm on a page and it says I'm on like row 587 and I want to go all the way back to row 1? Do I really have to repeatedly swipe down with 3 fingers? And the answer is no, because there's another gesture. You may have heard it a few minutes ago, and I said I'd come back to it. You may have forgotten about it by now. Listen again as I touch or tap the status bar.
3:39 p.m. Status bar item. Swipe down with 3 fingers to reveal notifications. Swipe up with 3 fingers to reveal the control center. Double tap to scroll to top.
That very last thing, double tap to scroll to top. Once you have focus on the status bar, you can literally do what it says. You can double tap with 1 finger and it will scroll up your document or your web page or whatever it is in your app to the very, very top. And that is a quick way to get back to the top of the screen, the top of a document, the top of a web page, or whatever it may be. So thus far, we have talked about how to unlock our phone. Press the side button, or we tap or raise the phone, authenticate with our finger or with Face ID, depending on the model of the phone. And we're going to teach you how to set those up later. We talked about the go home gesture. Place the finger at the bottom edge. You'll hear a little blip. Swipe up to the second blip sound. We talked about basic navigation, left and right with one finger, or randomly touch anywhere on your screen to, just sort of tap on it to bring focus to a particular icon or a particular element of the screen. And again, we taught you what the voiceover cursor was, and we move that by swiping to the left or to the right with one finger. When we find what we want, we double tap with one finger and we activate that particular item. We taught you about the basic layout of the home screen and the various components on the home screen, the app area, which also has your widgets. You could call it the icon area, the search and page selector icon. You can swipe up and down with one finger on that. You can double tap it to reveal the spotlight search. The dock, those 4 persistent icons across the bottom of the screen, same on every page. And of course, the status bar at the very top. We also taught you 2 different ways to get into Control Center. One is when you have the focus on the status bar, swipe up with 3 fingers. You might say, well, I'm already at the top. How do I swipe up? Well, again, remember, it doesn't have to be at the top. As long as your focus is on the status bar, you can swipe up with 3 fingers from anywhere on the screen. But that's one way to get to Control Center. Or the more modern way, if you have a newer device, just the reverse of the home gesture. Touch the top of the screen, hear a little blip sound, swipe down to the second blip to get Control Center. And we talked about the long press gesture. That is to double tap and hold on an item. We also said you could triple tap if you don't want to double tap and hold. Some people might have, dexterity issues and they say, I can't keep my finger steady to hold. Well, then just do the triple tap. And we taught you 3-finger scroll. Swipe up, swipe down to scroll within a page. Swipe left, swipe right to turn the page when it's available. And of course, double tap on that status bar to scroll very quickly to the top. We did not get into notifications yet. And I'm going to save that for Wednesday because I don't want to bring too much to the table at one time. I want to give you a chance to really absorb these things. If you're new to this, we'll have the recording up soon, but we're going to take your questions here in a moment. Don't worry. But we're going to save notifications for Wednesday. And then we're going to also get into the rotor on Wednesday, which I know some of you are very much looking forward to. We'll spend a good bit of time on the rotor, maybe some other things on Wednesday if time permits, but spend a lot of time on the rotor and how to use it, what it is, what it's not, how it works, all that fun stuff. Now, I am going to teach you right now, just to comment on this, that there's so many more gestures, and we'll learn many of them as we go throughout this course. But if you're feeling adventurous and you want to try some other gestures, I want to tell you how to find other gestures, and I want to tell you how to get help before we let you go for today. And then once I do that, I'm going to turn things over to Cliff and Sarah, let them add their comments, and then we'll go to questions. So just a couple more minutes. If you have a question, we'll get to it as best we can. But first, let me tell you some ways that you can get help in between things. So for one thing, remind you, we have our Tuesdays with TTJ. So we have a help session tomorrow at 2 and again on Saturday at 7. You can come in, different link, but you can find it on our website. And that's ttjtech.biz. You can go to free resources, and that page has all the info about the podcast, the YouTube channel, and the Tuesdays and Saturday sessions. So that's one way you can get help. What about if you want to get help right now on your device? How can you do that? Well, there's several ways that you can do that. The first way that you can do that is anywhere that you are in any app. It doesn't matter what app you're in. You can perform a 4-finger double tap on the screen. So let me show you what that sounds like. Turn my volume up again.
Wallet. Double tap to open.
Now I'm going to 4-finger double tap.
Starting help. To stop help, perform a 4-finger double tap or 2-finger scrub or press escape on the keyboard.
Okay. You haven't learned the 2-finger scrub yet. We'll teach it to you, but now you heard about it. But now I'm in this help mode, and it's a learning mode where I can perform any gestures that I want to. And you notice it even said keyboard. So if I had a Bluetooth keyboard, we're going to teach keyboards much later on in this course. But if I had one attached, I could even press keys to hear what they do. But I can perform any gesture. So let's do the 1-finger.
1-finger swipe right. Move to next item.
Well, we knew that. Remember? 1-finger swipe left.
1-finger swipe left. Move to previous item.
All right. Let's see if I'm telling the truth about the double tap.
1-finger double tap. Activate.
Yep. How about the long press? Maybe it won't tell me that one.
1-finger triple tap. Perform long press.
Okay. It doesn't seem to read the double tap and hold, but it does read the triple tap. What about my 3-finger gesture? Swipe up.
3-finger swipe up. Scroll down.
All right. Let's try 3-finger swipe right. Previous page.
3-finger swipe right. Scroll left.
And that's scroll left, or, to the previous page. They're calling that scroll left. What about, gestures we don't know? I've heard people say that there's a magic tap. And I think they say it's a 2-finger double tap. I think as a 2-finger double tap, they call it the magic tap. Let's see if that's true. 2-finger double tap.
2-finger double tap. Magic tap.
And that is a powerful gesture. It will answer phone calls. It will end phone calls. It will play music. It will pause music. It will take photos. It will record voice memo. It just depends where you are. But that's why they call it magic tap. And I really, truly believe, sometimes they say that the fiction is almost better than reality when you hear something. I don't think Apple created that term magic tap. Now, I apologize if they did. I don't want to, but I think that was created by the community of users, and Apple eventually adopted it, because I remember days when that was not in Apple's documentation. They used to just call it 2-finger double tap. All right. So what about a 1-finger? What about a 2-finger single tap? What's that do?
2-finger single tap. Toggle speech.
And that's useful if you are listening to something and you want to pause, just cause VoiceOver to stop talking. Just perform a 2-finger tap. It'll pause, 2-finger again, it'll resume. Oh, I don't know. What about something weird like, what about like a 2-finger quadruple tap? Is that such a thing?
2-finger quadruple tap. Open quick settings.
Okay. And so you get the idea. You can try these gestures, see what they do. When you're finished.
All right, Matt. Let me do one, because I want to point something out here. What about a 4-finger swipe down? Let's see what that one does.
4-finger swipe down. Paste.
And what does a 4-finger swipe up does?
4-finger swipe up. Copy.
Well, those are actually not voiceover gestures built in. That's a custom gesture that I stole from Matt that you can customize. Now, we haven't gotten to that yet, but I just wanted to show you that if you turn on help as like on the Mac, when you create a commander, it automatically shows up in your voiceover settings. So if you create a gesture and you forget what it is, or you think you might know what it is, you can just turn on help and do that gesture, and it will say,
1-finger swipe down.
Oops, wrong one.
Touch. 4-finger swipe down. Paste.
Yep, so it will paste. So Matt told me about that a couple of years ago, that he created that a couple of years ago when they first introduced custom gestures, and it was a great idea. So I've been using it ever since. It's been on my device ever since. So I mean, it's just a real easy way to copy and paste text without having to select it all the time.
Yeah, that's a fun gesture. That is. So there you go. So when you're done with this help mode, again, you can perform that same 4-finger double tap, or if you know how to do the 2-finger scrub, which basically it's just placing 2 fingers on the screen. Now, people will get into the idea of making a Z, and they'll call it the Z scrub. Don't worry about that. I've never seen a Z written in my life. I don't think I could write one. I've probably been shown it because my daughter was showing me, how to make the letters and stuff, but I don't remember a bunch of them. I think it's very complex, not being able to see it. Don't worry about that, whether it's Z or not. All you have to do is put 2 fingers on the screen, and just imagine, like, what I think about is like, maybe you're eating at the table and somebody says, "Oh, you got a little spot of of jelly right there on the table, you know. And so they take a wet cloth and they just very quickly back and forth on that little spot. They're not rubbing the whole table, but just that little spot. Well, it's the same thing if you two finger scrub. That's about 3 times, just very quick.
2-finger scrub, escape, stopping help.
And notice it said stopping help. So it automatically did that. If you're not comfortable with that, you could also 4-finger double tap again. That's one way to get help. Another way to get help. Now, this requires you to go into the settings. But I think we've shown you enough to do that. If you go into the settings.
Settings. Double tap.
Double tap.
Settings.
Now, I'm just going to be swiping right until I hear accessibility.
Search, dictate, Matthew Vault, Cam, Airplane, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth.
And let me be clear, I normally would not do that because I know approximately where accessibility is. So I would just touch the screen lower down. You could do that.
Accessibility.
Okay,
button.
double tap.
Accessibility, heading.
Now I'm going to be swiping right until I hear voiceover.
Personalized vision, voiceover, on, button.
And I'm going to double tap.
Voiceover, switch button, on.
Now,
double tap to toggle setting.
Apart from playing with your settings and exploring and experimenting, which I think is fine if you're comfortable doing that, but we're not teaching all that today yet. We'll get there. But apart from that, which in and of itself is a worthwhile exercise, there are some help resources under here that I want to make sure I point out. So let's start swiping right.
Voiceover speaks items on the screen. Tap once to select an item. Double tap to activate the selected item. Learn more, link.
There's your first help resources. Learn more. And that's going to give you additional on-screen guidance. But now let's keep going. Let's not learn more. Let's go to the right.
What's new in VoiceOver? Link. VoiceOver practice button. VoiceOver tutorial button.
Okay. So you have 3 options there. VoiceOver, what's new in VoiceOver is the first one. So for our longtime users, if you want to see what was introduced in iOS 18 for VoiceOver specifically, you can choose what's new in VoiceOver. The next one you have is VoiceOver practice. Now, this is actually almost identical to that 4-finger double tap help mode that we have, except this one, I think if they haven't changed it, it leaves the bottom and top of the screen unchanged so that you can still like swipe to go home and stuff instead of a complete full screen experience. But it's basically the same as your 4-finger double tap VoiceOver help mode. But the third one, which is brand new this year, and I want you to hear it again.
VoiceOver tutorial button.
VoiceOver tutorial. Our Macintosh users will recognize this. This is a quick start, kind of like the quick start tutorial on the Mac. It's going to take you through the basics of learning VoiceOver without having any impact on the device. It's going to show you these different gestures, many of them that we've shown you today. It probably might go a little further than we went in one day because, we're coming back on Wednesday and beyond, but it's going to take you through the basics of learning to navigate with VoiceOver on your iPhone or iPad, whatever device you're using. The other resource that I want to, and again, to open that, you just double tap it. The other resource that I want to show you.
Speaking rate, adjust the speaking
We'll
rate.
skip that.
Speech, braille, voiceover, verbosity, audio, commands, button.
Commands. This is a list. If you go into commands, it is a list of every VoiceOver command, whether it is a gesture or Apple calls them touch gestures, whether it's a keyboard command, whether it's braille, handwriting, and you can narrow down by picking a category or you can pick all commands. And there'll be some that are empty where you can create your own gesture, just as Cliff demonstrated a couple of them that he had created. This is the place, the definitive place on board your device. People say, can you send me a list of VoiceOver commands? To which I say no. And it's not, I'm not trying to be rude, but I would rather not send them something that may or may not be outdated. I may have forgotten something. They're all there. They're right on your device. You don't need anybody to send them to you. You don't even have to go and Google search for them, although it's certainly a good practice to learn how to search the web for things, but you don't need to for this. They're all right on board. You just go into commands there under VoiceOver on your accessibility settings. All the commands, the gestures, the keyboard, everything is listed there. And again, you can even create your own in some cases. So those are the help resources for today. Now, what you'll do at the upper left corner of the screen, you're going to find a back button. That's another one of those predictable patterns, but we're getting a little ahead of ourselves, so I'm just going to do it for today.
Accessibility, back button, accessibility,
And then
back settings,
back to settings, and then I can swipe up to go home.
Photos.
I want to thank you all for joining us. God bless you and have a great day. And we'll see you next time, everybody.
Thanks for joining today's session. Didn't get your question answered? Have an additional comment or feedback? Email us info@ttjtech.biz or info@stiritup.com. And remember, stir is spelled with a U. That's STURITUP.com. Or check out our websites for additional resources. That's ttjtech.biz or stiritup.com. And remember, subscribe to the newsletter when you're there. That way, you don't miss out on any upcoming announcements or events. Thanks for joining us. God bless, and see you next time.